Hello, everybody. My name is Troy Turbyville, and I'm going to be doing this podcast, video podcast, on a weekly basis. Why am I doing this? Well, I can't really get into that right now, but it involves an opportunity that might be able to happen for me down the road. So I'm going to shoot this on a weekly basis, talking about Cardinal sports. I'm going to call it Ville on the Ville. Just going to do a really quick show today. I'm going to put it up here on my YouTube channel. Usually on probably Wednesday or Thursday. Due to the holidays and the way things are going, I had to squeeze one in here on a Friday. But I wanted to go ahead and do this and get this off the ground now. Anybody who tunes in, I greatly appreciate it. And any feedback you want to give me, you can shoot it to me on Twitter, tville73, or right here on the YouTube channel as well. So if you've tuned in, I greatly appreciate it. But what this is going to be, I'm going to call this Ville on the Ville. I'm going to do this at least once a week and see where it goes. I'm going to talk about Louisville sports up and down the board. Going to do a quick hitter again today, about 10 or 15 minutes. And just talk about the cards and things that are going on. A lot of things to talk about, so I'm going to get right into it. The men's basketball team off to a decent start. They've really struggled at times getting out of the gate, but at the same time, they really haven't done too poorly in terms of what they've shown on the court against the top competition. The toughest games they've had, they've played pretty well. They just haven't finished. They went to Purdue. I wasn't real confident with that game, but they were right there at the end and just couldn't seem to make the plays down the stretch. Of course, against Seton Hall, same thing. You know, they even had a bigger margin. They got out to the 7-point lead midway through the second half, and you really felt like they were going to close things out. And then they hit that stretch where they just kind of get a little loose and careless, don't get a defensive stop on the other end, and then that goes on for 2 or 3 possessions, and the next thing you know, that game was tied again, and Seton Hall just made the plays down the stretch. I think they scored on several, 7 straight possessions, and really took that game. And despite that, Quentin Snyder still had a shot there at the end to win it. So if that goes in, that kind of changes the complexion of things quite a bit and how you're looking at this team. But they've rolled off a few wins in a row since, including the win over Indiana, and now they've got the Memphis Tigers in New York taking on the Tigers. Of course, a real Louisville fan, Earl was going to call Memphis State, taking on the Tigers. And Tubby Smith, it's crazy to think that John Calipari coached at Memphis, and now he's at UK. Tubby Smith coached at UK, now he's at Memphis. I don't know, those two guys just like coaching at Louisville's biggest rivals, but Louisville and Memphis State have really kind of fallen out in terms of playing each other regularly. That's the name. Growing up for me, that was the big rival before they started playing Kentucky on a regular basis in the fall of 1983. Memphis State was the big rival, and names, like Andre Turner and Elliot Perry and Baskerville Holmes, one of the best names ever, Keith Lee, William Bedford, the list goes on and on. Those were the names I remembered in those big games against Memphis State back in the day. So, yeah, they're still a rival, but when you look at what they've become, they're probably as down as they've been in quite some time. Tubby Smith just has not really been doing that much on the recruiting trail. The talent has dropped off. They lost some guys off the team last year to transfer, so their talent level is just down quite a bit. So much so that they're off to a 7-2 start, just like Louisville, but they really haven't played much of a schedule, and the decent teams that they've played with any of a pulse have beaten them and beaten them pretty handily. So this is a game that you would expect Louisville should win. So hopefully that's what we'll get out of that game at Madison Square Garden. But you never know. This is a young Louisville team, and what we have seen out of them is inconsistency, tough getting off to a good start in a lot of these games. And that's my single worry with this game is that Memphis, this is a calendar, circle on the calendar game for them. Probably in their whole season, they might play a bigger marquee game than Louisville. So they're going to be focused and dialed in. In Louisville, it's quite different. Yeah, this is Memphis, the team that you're a big rival to, but really none of the guys on this team or the coaching staff, for that matter, really had the appreciation for it, probably as much as Memphis may have. So do they go in as focused and dialed in? Like I said, they've already shown a tendency to not get off to a great start, so if they do that again, they could get behind the 8 ball and things could go from there. So what I'm hoping is one of the guys on this team that he started to come around in terms of his shot, but Quentin Snyder, most of the season, that's the guy you thought would be the rock. And while he is playing a little better here as of late, especially the last few games, hasn't turned the ball over as much, he still hasn't quite been the player I expected, and I attribute a lot of that to just the chaos that happened. You talk about losing the the coach that brought you here, the one that I always think about that picture, Quentin Snyder as a young kid at the basketball camp with Rick Pitino. All this stuff has probably impacted him as much as anybody else on this team. So he's probably just trying to find his footing, get back to some sort of normalcy, and hopefully now we're starting to see that. And this trip to New York, getting away from Louisville, may be a good thing for him. So what I really hope to see is Quentin Snyder have a great game, and I'm not saying score a lot. I'm just saying run the offense, make good passes, because those are the things we haven't seen as much of out of him. Just the little things like that alley-oop. He's struggled the last game against last couple games, actually. You've seen Ryan McMahon come in and seemingly be really sharp with some of these passes. That high screen backdoor alley-oop, he's ran that multiple times and looked fantastic, and that's something Q just hasn't seemed to have been able to dial in. And I recall him doing that well as a freshman. You know he can do it. So I'm hoping that maybe getting away from Louisville, getting out, away from the Yum Center, maybe that'll help him find his game a little bit more. So hopefully a big game from Quentin Snyder, because this team, they're only going to go as far as Quentin Snyder takes them, bottom line. And we know he can do it. So hopefully this will be the start of this team maturing and coming together. So much potential. What I have tried to do is take a very level-headed approach to this team because they're so young, because so much chaos has happened. Young coaches as well. There's just so much growing that can happen. And I tweeted out, after the frustrating start, I think it was against Siena, I just stopped myself from tweeting anything negative and simply said, all I'm going to say is this team has enormous potential for improvement. And that's true. So hopefully, as the season goes on, we'll start to see that. And hopefully we start to see progression of that against Memphis this weekend in the Garden. Moving on to women's basketball. Speaking of a team that does not have a trouble getting off to a good start, and that's Jeff Walls and the ladies. They have been absolutely fantastic, 12-0, and really take care of business. Kramer said it himself, TCB, baby, taking care of business, and they have absolutely done that. The teams they're supposed to beat, they beat, and they don't leave a doubt for the most part. I think their only game against what you would consider lesser competition, I think it was South Dakota State. That was a road game, and apparently a very hostile environment. I saw the ladies on Twitter giving a shout-out to them for the environment they have up there. Tough game, they said, and they got out with a win. But outside of that, the games here at home, they have absolutely been dominant to the tune of dare I say, UConn-esque scores. I mean, if you look at them here, I mean, they have just dominated most of this competition. 50-point wins. I mean, that game, 80-26. I mean, that's just dominant. So we'll be interesting to see, can they continue that? Now, the big test comes this weekend. It gets real in Lexington on Sunday, because this Cardinal basketball team, the ladies, over the past several years have, most would say they've been the better team over Kentucky, but for whatever reason, they just can't get the win. And even last year when they did beat Kentucky, it took overtime. And the crazy thing is they've been considered the better team. Not that Kentucky's been garbage. They've been a good team, but most people would say Louisville is the better team, but Kentucky had won 5 in a row. And in most of those games, Louisville had given up double-digit leads. So it's almost like this brain lock thing going on with them and the Wildcats. So definitely like a measuring stick game, as cliche as that sounds, for the ladies. It's another road game. It's going to be another hostile environment. So that South Dakota State game may come in handy, because you're going to see a hostile environment in Lexington. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle it. How they go in there, and if they can take care of business in the way we all hope they can. So a lot on the line there in Lexington for Jeff Walls and the ladies. Moving on, Lamar Jackson and the football team obviously finished great, 3 wins in a row, dominant fashion in all 3, and of course capping it off with a absolute beatdown of the Wildcats in Lexington. I encourage you, if you've not, I put together a highlight video of that game. I called it Heisman Trophy, then Beatdown. A little play on words of the little Twitter hashtag that Kentucky fans like to tease Lamar Jackson about the fumble and the loss the year before, thinking that I guess he wasn't going to win the Heisman, but he did, and then he came back and beat him down there. You can find that on my YouTube channel if you haven't checked that out. I encourage you to. But Lamar finished great. It was great to see him get back to New York, where he deserved to be. Finishing third was absurd. I mean, you're talking about guys who vote and have a responsibility to vote saying that they didn't watch much Lamar Jackson this year because his team wasn't that good. Well, if that's how you're going to approach that responsibility, you shouldn't have it. Simple as that. So hopefully they will start taking it a little more seriously, and if they don't, the Heisman Trust should. I trust that they will look into these voters who don't seem to put much into their responsibility outside of just looking at the highlights and seeing who they should vote for. Because it's absolutely ridiculous to learn that nearly half of the ballots didn't even have Lamar Jackson on them, and that's just unconscionable. There's no reason for that. He absolutely is one of the best, if not the best, player in college football, and to not even be included on almost half the votes, the voting ballots, is absolutely absurd. Now, I have no problem with Baker Mayfield winning. I think he's deserving. He was on a great team. They're in the playoff. His numbers were fantastic as well, so I had no problem. I didn't expect Lamar Jackson to win, but I definitely did not expect him to come in third, in a distant third at that. So congratulations to Baker Mayfield, and we'll see how things go in terms of the pro level. That's the other thing that's irritated me a little bit when you hear the criticisms of Lamar Jackson and his game. Does he have what it takes to succeed at the pro level? Something very interesting that I had wanted to look into and I just didn't have the resources was Lamar Jackson. They say, can he make the throws? Can he do the things? Can he grasp the offenses at the next level? Well, he runs one of the more complex offenses in college football, and it was my belief that he was a guy who threw more difficult passes than a lot of these other quarterbacks, and that was sort of bore out this week when Cecil Lammey here tweeted out this stat of passes attempted behind the line of scrimmage. And when it says pass attempts at or behind the line, it was kind of confusing. Aren't all passes behind the line or else they're a penalty? What this meant was where the pass went to. So where it ended, not where it started. And Lamar Jackson, as you can see there, only 62 passes at or behind the line ended at or behind the line of scrimmage. And that's an interesting stat, and that supported my thought that he threw fewer short passes. However, you have to put that in perspective of how many passes he threw in total, and that actually also bore itself out when you look at the numbers. And strangely enough, Lamar Jackson threw quite a few passes. I would have thought he might be lower because he ran a lot, but if you think about it, the other guys were probably handing off, whereas he was just running. He actually threw 30 more passes than Baker Mayfield. But if you look at these numbers of those top quarterbacks, he was at the bottom, and by quite a margin. 15.5% of his passes were considered the shorter variety of not going past the line of scrimmage. Now, what if you add in 5-yard passes? What if you add in passes of under 10 yards? What does that say about Lamar Jackson? I would think that he threw probably more longer passes than most because it seemed like they threw down the field quite a bit. Even at points I would be critical, saying, man, let's just get 3 or 4 or 5 yards and get a first down. Why are we going down the field so much? But when you talk about the offense he ran and the criticisms he's getting, it just doesn't make sense. They don't sync up. Okay, you're seeing a guy who runs a very complex offense. He doesn't throw short, gimmicky passes. So why do you think he can't succeed at the next level? I don't want to get into the social aspect of it and assumptions that are made, but I think you can kind of draw your own conclusion. I mean, it's ridiculous. And what he has shown is the ability that he does have. He has the arm. He has the offense. So you need to give the guy the respect of what he has done, what he has accomplished, and the potential that he shows. Because other guys, what are they doing that Lamar Jackson isn't doing? And then the question answers itself. Why is he being criticized? So it's a little unfair. Moving along, got to wrap things up here pretty shortly, but wanted to touch on an idea I had. This week, Petrino was given a $500,000 bonus, which is great for progression towards APR, the advancement towards a degree, and that's a bonus that they get, that they have to maintain a certain APR score, or else they're docked scholarships. We saw that happen when he who shall not be named was the coach. They were penalized. When Charlie Strong came in, he had to deal with scholarship reductions because they weren't progressing. But Petrino, they've done a fantastic job. I think that started with the foundation Charlie Strong laid, and Petrino's been able to maintain that. But what I got to thinking about, $500,000 is a ton of money. and Bobby Petrino justifiably earned that in his contract. But it does open up the question of, does this present an opportunity to really be forward-thinking in terms of how you can reward athletes, college athletes? I've said for some time that I think college athletes should profit from their likeness, from their name. However, how do you do that? Paying athletes while they're playing is kind of dirty. I think some people don't like that thought, the thought of doing that. So the idea I had, and I'm sure others have had it as well, I'm not claiming to be the person that came up with this idea, but I think it would be fairly simple to set up a system where, I mean, every athlete has a number associated with them already, I would assume. And I understand that, the collegiate licensing company or whatever entity is involved in licensing this merchandise for colleges and universities now, you've got to file reports on a quarterly basis. I was involved in doing some of this stuff 10 years ago or so. So I assume it still works the same way. You file a quarterly report. Every university has a number. You fill it out, you send it in, you pay, and they get that money. Well, it could simply come down to every athlete has a code, just like every college has a code. And when merchandise sells with that code, it goes a certain percentage that's predetermined, goes to that athlete. And that goes into a fund, and that fund stays there until that athlete is done participating in college athletics. And then their money is released to them. So you're not paying them while they play. It's just a reward when they're done playing. And all the money, whether it's from, they bring back the football game, the EA Sports college football game, whether it's just general money that goes in, whether it's from a APR bonus, the coach could say, I want half of that money to go to all the players that help me earn that bonus. So let's say 30 of the football players achieve that score, 3.0 or above. It's divided up and it goes into that fund, and then it gets released to them when they graduate. I definitely think that absolutely as much money as college athletics makes, I think it's only right to start investigating instead of trying to figure out ways to spend money on stupid stuff, all the while claiming you're nonprofit. You're putting in, locker rooms with massage rooms and swimming pools and slides and all sorts of crazy stuff. This will be a better way to give that money back to the athletes who do put in a lot of work, a lot more than most of us probably could imagine. And it wouldn't feel quite as dirty because, at least they don't get that money until they're done. So that's my thought. And I thought when I read that about the bonus, I was happy. I mean, it's great to hear that the football team is doing a good job. But at the same time, it made me think about, hey, that's another thing that you could do. The coach could didn't designate a certain amount of that money to go into a fund like that. So TaxSlayer Bowl coming up. I'm just going to hit on this really quick. A month and a half ago, if you said Louisville and Mississippi State were going to play in a bowl game, if you're a Louisville fan, you would have been probably biting your tongue and saying, I don't want that matchup. Todd Grantham, Mississippi State's playing good, Louisville's not. Well, what a difference a month or so makes. They have been decimated. Obviously, their coach is gone. Grantham has gone with him to Florida. They lost their quarterback in the Egg Bowl in their big rivalry game. Meanwhile, Louisville has completely turned around in terms of both offense and defense, mainly defense, but the offense has really been consistent. That's what they struggled with, that losing streak in the middle where they lost to Boston College in particular. The offense hit that rut in the second and third quarter where they just weren't moving the ball at all, and the defense wasn't stopping anything, and that compounded and just snowballed, and then the next thing you know, you're losing to Boston College, a game they had no business losing. But things did come around. So you're looking at now a TaxSlayer Bowl that it's still an SEC opponent, so you like that. I think this was probably the best bowl game Louisville could have hoped for, given the circumstances. I was hoping for maybe a South Carolina team with a little bit better, not really much better record, but a little more momentum. I think they finished much stronger, and of course you don't have the coaching issues, the loss of coaches, and the injuries that the Mississippi State is dealing with. So I will get into more about the TaxSlayer Bowl the next time we convene here. I'm going to wrap things up now. This is wraps it up for this episode of Ville on the Ville. If you've tuned in, I greatly appreciate it. And again, I can't really get into why I'm doing this. Just know that it's something that I hope will lead to something very, very exciting and very unique and fun for Louisville fans down the road. So again, if you've tuned in and you want to comment, feel free to. I'd appreciate that. You can also hit me up on Twitter. So we'll wrap it up now. Until next time, go Cards.